the WBC belt that has included Ali, the greatest of all time. They are set and ready to answer who's the greatest of right now. Wilder, Fury 2, here we go.
News! Okay, we'll start with this. Well, Oscar De La Hoya says he wants to get Zurdo Ramirez to 52-0, break record that Floyd Mayweather Jr. holds. And, Oscar's obsession with Floyd Mayweather Jr., it's always stood out to me because it's not like Floyd Mayweather Jr. is the only guy that ever beat Oscar De La Hoya. He's lost other fights with other fighters, but he doesn't maintain the animosity with those fighters that he maintains with Floyd Mayweather Jr. Here you have a recent signee to Golden Boy Promotions, your latest fighter, you're invested in, and all you can talk about is Floyd.
Move on.
Is it because Floyd Mayweather Jr. remains successful, more successful than you were, even in retirement? Perhaps Floyd Mayweather Jr. is not as beloved or as revered in some circles as Oscar De La Hoya. Oscar's got his supporters, he's got his fans, but in terms of business, in terms of finance, Floyd Mayweather Jr. is actually more successful than Oscar. I think a part of the reason that Oscar maintains so much animosity towards Floyd is that Oscar was the platform. The fight with Oscar was the launch pad that sent Floyd Mayweather Jr. to the next stratosphere. It was after that Oscar De La Hoya fight that things really took off for Floyd Mayweather Jr. I think Oscar knows that. I think he resents Floyd Mayweather Jr. for it. Thus, he maintains that same animosity many, many years later after their encounter. You're talking about getting Zurdo Ramirez to 52-0, which is just a number lacking a lot of context.
52-0?
Right now, Zurdo Ramirez is at about 41 wins, no losses, 27 knockouts. But over who?
Exactly.
Did he beat 20 current and former world champions the way that Floyd Mayweather Jr. did? Does he have the Chico Corraleses and Castillos and Maidanas and Cottos and Canelos, so on and so forth? Is his resume comprised of those kinds of fighters, those kinds of names? Because if it ain't, then it's just a fucking number. You can get a ham sandwich to 52-0 if he's matched right. You talk about Floyd Mayweather Jr., you're going to get a lot of polar opposites. You're going to get people that love the fucking guy, swear by the guy. You're going to get people that hate the fucking guy.
Hate everything about him.
50-0, Floyd Mayweather Jr.'s record. 50 wins, no losses, no draws, 27 knockouts. That's his record. And to Floyd, obviously, he prides himself on that record, that undefeated record, having broken Rocky Marciano's record of 49-0. It's a point of pride for Floyd. It's a point of pride for his supporters. But for his detractors, they diminish that 50-0 record. Detractors like Oscar De La Hoya is a detractor. It's an unreasonable hate, because if his 50-0 record don't mean nothing, then why are you so stuck on it? Why have you made it your mission to get Zurdo Ramirez to 52-0 if Floyd's undefeated 51-0 or 50-0, whatever it is, don't mean nothing? If it don't mean nothing to Floyd, it certainly ain't gonna mean nothing for Zurdo.
He's got a lot of fights, but his resume's paper thin.
Zurdo's record, 41-0. It pales in comparison to what Floyd Mayweather Jr.'s record was at that time. By that time, Floyd already fought Oscar De La Hoya. He already fought Arturo Gatti and Chico Corrales and Gennaro Hernandez, Angel Manfredi, Zab Judah.
Already fought those guys.
Marcus Corley, Ricky Hatton. I mean, you name it. Floyd already had significant fights, several significant fights on his professional CV by the time he was 41-0, whereas for Zurdo, the biggest name on his resume is Jesse Hart. 2 fights with Jesse Hart. So, I mean, you can get Zurdo to 52-0. You can try. I think it will be difficult in today's light heavyweight division. Better still, you can get him that far, and his resume still won't stack up to Floyd. So what are we really talking about here? I'll tell you what we're talking about here. Oscar's irrational hate, his grudge, that he still holds on to here today for Floyd Mayweather Jr., because that's what it's all about. It's more about that than it's about Zurdo. It's about you and Floyd. And Floyd's not sitting around talking about you. Floyd's not sitting around worried about what you're doing. This guy, in spite of what I thought would happen, this guy just sold 1 million pay-per-view buys with a fucking YouTube. That's what he's doing. What he's not doing is sitting around talking about you the way you're sitting around talking about him.
Been a rough couple of years for Oscar.
And he lost Canelo Alvarez to another promoter who's on the same platform as him. Same platform as Golden Boy Promotions. He lost Canelo Alvarez, and you can't downplay the effect that has had on Golden Boy Promotions. That was a major bargaining chip for them. A major achievement as well, having groomed Canelo Alvarez to become what he became. The face of boxing in this country, and this country's biggest draw, so to speak, because he does primarily fight out of America, though he's not American himself. They lost that guy. He went somewhere else. Oscar, he's a guy with a lot of grudges. He's got a grudge for Canelo, he's got a grudge for Floyd, and that's the only thing that this news communicates to me. In other news, per tweet from Michael Benson, Bob Arum says Eddie screwed everything up. Oh, it was Eddie that screwed everything up. The Saudis were happy to pay a tremendous site fee. Eddie got greedy. Pay a bigger amount. Take the TV. It dragged on for weeks. I believe if it had just been a site fee, we'd have announced, and the arbitrator would have given Wilder damages. And that's a load of horse shit. I mean, seriously. Who, if not Bob Arum,
Tyson Fury,
and just that entire side of things, who, if not them, was expressing the most pessimism, the most negativity, so you could turn around and try to hang it all around Eddie Hearn's fucking neck that things didn't work out? Eddie Hearn's not the reason we're here right now.
You are.
Your mediation arbitration with Deontay Wilder, if you believe that story. That's why we are where we are, and that's why this fight is where it is, and that is nowhere.
We get the final draft back from Saudi. Okay, everyone's on board. Tyson Fury comes out. The fight's on. I'm happy. It's all done. Spoke to the Saudis. Got confirmation. Let's go. 2 days after. Oh, sorry guys. Yeah, we've got to do the rematch. I mean, what sort of ruling is that from an arbitrator to order a rematch with a specific date? And then, when the arbitration ruling comes through, you clearly see that Top Rank had the ability to terminate the agreement with Deontay Wilder back in, I think it was December. But the fact is, they didn't terminate. They kept planning the fight. They kept talking to Top Rank, to PBC. And I've got many thoughts, and very valid ones, about what has happened here. I want to do a little bit more digging into this, but the whole thing absolutely stinks. AJ feels that Fury never wanted to fight him, that Fury was just using his name for clout. I think there's a very valid argument with that. I'd like to believe that Tyson Fury wants this fight and wanted this fight, and basically he was just fucked by others. I got to a stage where no one tried 1 inch to ever make this fight, apart from me and AJ.
Now what Uncle Bob wants us to believe is that if the fight would have been announced, the arbitrator might have made the decision to award Wilder damages and nothing more, when the day before the arbitrator made his decision, Tyson Fury took to social media to confirm that the fight with Anthony Joshua was on. It was Tyson Fury that took to his social media on the 16th last month, May the 16th, a Sunday. It was Tyson Fury that took to his social media after getting off the phone with the prince over there in Saudi Arabia to confirm that the fight with Anthony Joshua was on. In that way, your fighter made an announcement. The day after that, the day after he makes that announcement, the arbitrator rules in Wilder's favor. I mean, that's the way it happened, if you believe the cover story.
If we're gonna take this at face value.
Because at face value, that's what happened. An announcement was made, and the arbitrator, he didn't take that into consideration. And why would he?
Why?
What does Eddie Hearn have to do with your situation involving Wilder? You guys are the ones who entered into negotiations for an undisputed title fight, knowing you had this situation looming, this hanging over your heads. If anybody's responsible for this fight not materializing, it's Top Rank Tyson Fury. Now, I maintain my original assertion that these guys never had any intention of fighting Anthony Joshua because they were all too comfortable to walk away from that situation. Bob Arum, in so many words, said that they weren't going to pay Deontay Wilder to step aside. He made that crystal clear right after the arbitration ruling came down.
Don't pretend you did everything you could to make this fight happen.
Whilst blaming Eddie Hearn for what was your legal conundrum, your legal clusterfuck, your situation with Deontay Wilder. That if you're gonna look at this story and take it at face value, it's on Tyson Fury, it's on Bob Arum, and it's on Frank Warren that this fight is where it is.
What the hell's he blaming Eddie for?
Because they don't want to take the heat for it. They don't want to be held accountable by the boxing community at large. The same community they're hoping buys this third installment, Wilder versus Fury. They don't want to be held responsible for this by that community. They want that community to purchase that fight. Problem is, that community, they're pissed off right now. They're pissed off with Bob Arum. They're pissed off at Tyson Fury and Frank Warren. Talked to a few people since that arbitration ruling came down. A good number of them are disappointed, including Sulem Urbina, who had her hopes up to see that fight between Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury, and now has to settle for a Wilder trilogy.
Quien sabe? Do you feel the same excitement for Wilder versus Fury 3 that you felt for Joshua versus Fury? Or
No.
is it like, no?
No, not the same excitement at all. Like Fury, Joshua, I was like, yes, I can't wait. I'm gonna, barbecue party, boxing party. Let's do this. Wilder, Fury, it's like, okay, I'm gonna watch it.
I've spoken to quite a few people who harbor that sentiment, even after certain of the undercard fights were announced. The fight between Efe Ajagba and Frankie Sanchez, the rematch between Adam Kovnowski and Robert Helenius. I mean, it really is a stacked undercard based on that information, though all the same, the boxing community at large does feel jilted, a good number of them. They feel like they got taken for a ride by Bob Arum. They got taken for a ride by Tyson Fury, that it was never actually their intention to have that Anthony Joshua fight because, look, when you think about it, the first fight between Wilder and Fury was scored a draw. Thus, the second fight was supposed to be the tiebreaker. That's the one that was supposed to settle it. And in that fight, we know what happened. Tyson Fury comprehensively beat Deontay Wilder. Yet, there's still another engagement. There's still another fight. I mean, you look at this thing. The first fight was a draw. So the second fight was supposed to settle it.
Right?
If that's the case, ahead of the second fight, why Tyson Fury sign on for not just one more fight, but two fights, which would make this engagement with Wilder a trilogy? Think about it. The first fight scored a draw. You approached the negotiations for the second fight, and in those negotiations, you didn't sign on for one more fight. You signed on for two more fights.
Why would he have done that if he thought he was robbed?
Why would he have done that if the second fight was supposed to be the tiebreaker? We've mulled over many of the particulars in association with Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder's engagement and what might actually be going on here. But the gist of it is, the boxing community feels they've been taken for a ride, and it was never Tyson Fury's intention to fight Anthony Joshua.
You're an absolute clown if you can't see that the whole thing stinks. A clown. But in the only bit of defence for them, people say, oh, it's ridiculous. They sign the contract so quickly. A lot of the terms are already dealt with in the previous contract. So it is, but again, I'm not so bothered about how quickly it was signed. Just everything was so smooth. Yeah, let's announce on air, sign the contract, great, you sign the contract. If I'm Fury, I'm going, hang on a minute, what the fuck has gone on here? You told me this fight was being made. I'm making an absolute fortune. You guys are now putting me in a fight that but it wasn't. It was like, yeah, no problem. Okay, sign here, sign there. I mean, getting these people to agree to anything took months and months and months. Yet they're willing to move forward on a fight, which I'm sure many terms were pre-agreed, but just happily, arm in arm together. Stinks. The whole thing stinks. So we can't do anything about that. We have to move forward with AJ's career and make the right moves for him.
They just use this as an opportunity to make Eddie Hearn look bad, which Bob Arum is more than happy to do. Case in point, he's trying to make all of this Eddie Hearn's fault.
I told you this is what they were going to do.
I told you this was going to happen. Right now, Bob Arum, Frank Warren, Tyson Fury, they realize that the boxing community they're hoping to appeal to with this fight, the boxing community they're hoping pulls out their wallets in order to purchase this third installment of Wilder versus Fury, that boxing community's pissed off. It's going to be hard to sell them this fight when that boxing community is pissed off. So you're going to try to do a little PR job, put a little spin job on this thing, and make it Eddie Hearn's fault. Let them be mad at him. Let them be mad at Eddie Hearn and not at us because we're trying to sell you this fight.
Pretty obvious what Bob is doing.
Bob Arum added,
Eddie Hearn has diarrhea of the mouth. He can't stop talking, and he doesn't think. Eddie should shut up and stop blaming other people. He'd be well advised to shut his mouth, look in the mirror.
This is all on schedule. This is all expected. I told you guys immediately after that arbitration ruling, trying to make sense of it all, that it was conceivable that the Tyson Fury people, Bob Arum and Frank Warren, were going to do their best to make this Eddie Hearn's fault. It's all about making him look bad, making it seem as if he failed to deliver the fight, when in reality, he already delivered the fight, and it's your situation, your pre-existing situation with Deontay Wilder that held it up. That's if you believe the cover story. But if you're like me, and you think there's more going on here than meets the eye...
They never had any intention of fighting Anthony Joshua.
There was always going to be a trilogy. There was always going to be a third fight. What they were waiting for was for the crowds to come back, and in the in-between time, they used this delay, as an opportunity to try to make Anthony Joshua and Eddie Hearn look bad.
What this is.
Frank Warren's long-standing domestic rivalry with Eddie Hearn, what eventually grew to Bob Arum's disdain of Eddie Hearn, the young upstart.
Dynamo.
In front of all these old dinosaurs, all these old relics and fossils. Both Frank Warren and Bob Arum, the both of them's got a bone to pick with Eddie Hearn. Tyson Fury, we know he's got a bone to pick with Anthony Joshua. He feels jilted that Anthony Joshua was always more accepted by the UK's boxing community than he was, in spite of him beating Vladimir Klitschko first.
You don't have to wonder why they try to screw over Eddie.
And you don't have to wonder why they take time out of their day to try and make him look bad. That in unison with the fact that they're trying to sell you a trilogy. They're trying to sell you a third fight. And it's hard for them to do that when you're mad at them over everything that's happened. In that situation, the only way they can remedy it is to try to point the finger somewhere else, away from themselves. Make it Eddie Hearn's fault. Say he's the one that fucked everything up.
That's it.
But ultimately, after everything we've seen, I don't think people are going to buy that story. You got this young guy showing everybody up. He's doing shows all over the world, unlike Frank Warren, unlike Bob Arum. He's got this massive budget given to him from DAZN. He's got Canelo Alvarez in the United States and Anthony Joshua in the United Kingdom. The two biggest draws in the sport transatlantically.
He's getting too big.
I honestly believe that this is a part of an effort to slow him down. Slow him down as best as they can. Slow him down in the United Kingdom, slow him down in the United States. I think that's at least a part of whatever ulterior motive is in play here. Eddie Hearn's getting too big in the britches, and these guys, they don't like it. They don't want to play second fiddle to Eddie Hearn. They don't want to sit in the back seat. They would rather deprive him of the opportunity of making that fight than give him that satisfaction.
He was the main one brokering that deal.